All right, welcome to Product Design and Climate. And this is just going to be a fun hour learning from different folks about what their journey was into working on design and climate. And I'm just like really curious to hear more about their experiences and their journeys. So please welcome Deena Rosen, Eva Illescas Sanchez, and Melissa Cameron. Deena is a design lead currently at Google's sustainability team, and she's passionate about using behavioral design to solve some of our planet's biggest problems. As former head of design at Opower, she created products that nudged people to use less energy with big impact. Opower has saved 30 billion kilowatts of energy and $3 billion across 50 million homes. Deena worked for almost a decade with nonprofits and startups to apply best practices in behavioral design and human-centered design to environmental and social justice causes. She writes and speaks about behavioral design at all kinds of amazing places, including TED, Stanford Design School, and Good Magazine. So welcome. Eva is a seasoned product designer who has launched over 15 products globally for leading SaaS companies such as Microsoft, Abstract, and Inspire Clean Energy. She is also the founder of Work on Climate, an amazing Slack community, and also our host. And the community helps people find a job in climate, network with more than 10,000 members, attend events, and find their way to have a positive impact on our planet. And last but not least is Melissa Cameron. Melissa is a product designer at Patch, a startup building infrastructure to enable gigaton scale carbon removal through unified climate action. At Patch, she's focused on working with carbon credit project developers to help them sell their credits, scale their businesses, and bring more transparency and rigor to carbon markets. Before Patch, she spent 5 years designing at Stripe, building payments and financial services software, which powers some of the world's largest internet businesses. She holds a bachelor's degree in cognitive science with a specialization in human-computer interaction from UC San Diego, which sounds really interesting. So yeah, I think just to start off, I would love to hear from each of you. If you had some kind of like climate aha moment, or was there any particular moment or thing you read or thing you heard about that helped you kind of trigger your commitment to working in climate? And we can start with Deena, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia, so much. Everyone, so excited that there are 100 people here listening to this session. Really excited to talk with you all. I don't think I had an aha moment per se, but it was just a gradual awakening as to the importance of this work. I went to graduate school for product design, where we focused on designing physical products. And I think the world was just starting to wake up to the fact that a lot of the designs of physical products for to be replaced was not maybe the best approach. This really great book called The Story of Stuff had just come out. If you haven't heard of that, you should look up this book from maybe like 15 or 20 years ago. And it was just made me think a lot more about physical products' impact on the planet, and it made me want to switch over to a sort of different career path. And I lucked out working with a climate tech startup. And since then, I just haven't looked back and found that I really don't want to work on anything else. So I feel lucky to have accidentally stumbled into it 15 years ago and was able to build a career from there.
Yeah, and I might just transition into the first question I had for you, since it builds on that, and then we can jump to Eva. But you've been in this space for 15 years. So how has it changed for designers and technologists?
I think one is the awareness that this is such an important and urgent problem is way greater than it was 15 years ago. There weren't groups like Work on Climate back then. There wasn't a climate-based job board. There weren't all these great communities and resources. So it was more of like a burgeoning set of people starting to think about it. So I would say awareness has changed drastically, and also just the scale of opportunity has changed so much. There's so many great startups and organizations and people doing amazing things that there's just a ton more opportunity than there was 15 years ago. And I think there's a greater awareness that this type of work is actually good for business, not just good for the environment. So you're able to find jobs that also pay you good salaries, and you don't have to just work at a small nonprofit somewhere to do this work. You can work on some of the most cutting edge technologies, doing really exciting things. So yeah, it's just a totally different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Eva, what about you? Did you have a climate aha moment?
Yeah.
You're also from Spain, that's correct, and now you're in California.
Yeah, that's correct. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Yeah, I did had a few haha moments throughout my career. I was working at Microsoft before, and they have amazing opportunities for you to contribute in things that are not only related to your day job. So basically that means like participating in hackathons for good, or spending 20% of your time on doing something else that will feel inspiring and fulfilling for you. And I use those moments to try things like this to help in climate, but none of them were successful that we could pursue and build a business out of it, right, to scale it. So it was when I saw Eugene post on LinkedIn before when it went super viral, and I just thought that he was so right on the things that he was mentioning, and then he has the same feelings that I wouldn't want to spend one more minute working for someone that is not building something to help our planet. Like, I can, use my skills the same way that I'm using in another industry, but then on climate industry would be at least doing something else that is not helping customers, but also helping business, is also helping the planet. So for me, that was just the aha moment that I had. So I reached out to him, and then we were talking a few times, and I said, whatever you're going to be doing, I want to be doing it with you. So count me in. And from there, we also talked to Cassandra, the other co-founder of Work on Climate. And then we had a few sessions to try to identify what are the things that we wanted to build. And that's how the community came up, and it was born 2.5 years ago, I believe. 2 years. Yeah, it has been time flying. So yeah, that's my journey and how I got here.
Amazing. And then you've also done a lot of user research on people's climate journeys. So you're an expert in what this conversation is about in some ways. I'd be curious to hear from you, like, what are some of the common, real, or perceived barriers that people might have when approaching this?
Yeah, before starting any solution to try to address helping people to work on climate, we did some research. We talked to a lot of folks. We even were on that journey ourselves, so it was kind of easier to feel identifying with the things that people are going through. So we did that, and then we identified that the usual journey is like you try to search in the common platforms or services that you know of, and they are not prepared to fulfill that need for you. So basically, they don't have the proper filters. They don't. It's not easy to find what are the sustainable jobs or what are the jobs that are helping climate. They are not able to tell you how much of an impact they have, right? So it was kind of hard to know even what are the companies that exist on the industry, so you can reach out to them and understand what are they doing and then get a job. So that was not existing, or almost not existing, or easy accessible for people. So when we identified that, we were thinking that we can do something, and then the thing that it has worked the best usually on finding a job is networking. So that's why we thought about, okay, I believe the best solution could be for now creating a community where people can get together, no matter what is your journey, no matter what is you're looking for. We are going to try to have something for everyone. So no matter if you want to volunteer or work part-time or be an expert to share your knowledge, we want a hub where people can enrich from there. And then additionally to that, and the solution that we come up with, we also find a psychological barrier that we have in order to find a climate job. And it's just because you don't know the industry. There is a lot of unknowns, and specifically related to your skills, like how my skills can apply to this new industry or this new job if I don't have expertise on that. So there is a barrier there that once you are in the loop of your job, you are able to realize that the same skills apply everywhere you go. But until then, there is some tendency to just like feel frustrated and feel lost and don't know where to start. So we wanted also to tackle that issue with the community, and hopefully it's helping and a lot of people right there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Melissa, how about you? Did you have a aha moment?
Yeah, so I actually had a pretty vivid aha moment. It was back in early 2020. I'm not sure how I got my hands on it, but I found myself reading this book called The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. I'm sure quite a few in here have read it, but basically what the book does is it outlines along a bunch of different dimensions all of the ways in which we can expect the Earth to change at different degrees of warming. So 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 8 degrees of warming. And it's structured around basically like these different dimensions, and it includes your usual suspects like heat and like rising sea levels, but it also has quite a few that I wasn't previously aware of until reading that book. And so it talks about things like food production and drought and geopolitical conflict. And so just seeing like the massive scale at which we can expect change was just like completely eye-opening experience for me. And I kind of knew at that moment, like this was the problem that I wanted to focus on. And this is like really what I wanted to spend my life trying to help solve.
Yeah. And then what was your previous experience working as a product designer, and how was that applicable to the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so there are a few similarities. So I'm at Patch now doing product design. I was still at product design prior. I was at Stripe for 5 years. And in particular at Stripe, I worked on their product called Connect, which is really for these like particularly complicated business models that have a lot of needs around routing money to many different businesses and users across the world. And so it basically, the scale at which I guess I was solving problems at Stripe was very similar. When I worked on Connect, I was not only thinking about kind of like the users of Connect, which are businesses like Etsy or Lyft, but I was thinking about the users of those products at Etsy or Lyft, as well as like the users of those users. And so it was kind of just like huge in scope problem, which has like a lot of parallels with working in climate. And so similarly at Patch, kind of the core people I'm designing for are people at carbon removal businesses. And so tools that they're using in their day-to-day, but really at the end of the day, the success of my designs will affect the impact that they can ultimately have, which is really around everyone on Earth. And so some similarities there.
Yeah, that reminds me of how emissions are measured on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and like trying to anticipate all of these systemic impacts. Thank you. Deena, back to you. So I'm curious to hear more about what behavioral design is and why it's important for climate designers, and if you have any specific examples or case studies you wouldn't mind sharing.
I have so many.
I knew you would.
But I'll keep it brief. Okay, so behavioral design is using all of the skills and knowledge from behavioral science and behavioral economics, which is why humans act the way that they do, which is often not in the most rational way. We're driven by a lot of other forces. And so it's using that knowledge in conjunction with best practices from human-centered design to design your products and services in ways that help people make better decisions. So if you think about it, most of our world has been designed not really in our favor. It's most products have been designed to focus on getting people to buy more things or to benefit corporations, or they just haven't been designed well at all. And we have a lot of choice overload and information overload. So using behavioral design is kind of taking those tools from capitalism in the advertising industry that have been used for decades to get us to buy more stuff, but using those same tools instead to help us make better decisions for the planet, for our own health. And so it's really important, I think, for all designers to understand that skill set and the tools we have at our disposal, the behavioral levers we could use, because climate is something that it's sometimes hard to motivate around because it's sort of vague, it's in the future, and we all have, as humans, we have a present bias. We are going to choose the things that give us immediate benefits, immediate and tangible benefits, even if we know it might not be the right thing to do. So for example, we all know we should be exercising every day and eating only the most healthy foods and saving for retirement, but we still don't do these things. So it's really on our shoulders as designers to design for that intention action gap and to help motivate people to get over that gap when it comes to climate action. And so the example I'll give is Opower, because that's where I was for a long time. Opower is a company that was started based on behavioral design, based on a hypothesis where the founders knew about an academic study that was done where a behavioral economist, Robert Cialdini, wanted to know what would motivate people to use less energy in their homes. And when you ask people why it's important to save energy, people talked about, that it's good for the environment, that it would save them money. And so the team tested these messages, giving people these messages on their doors to see if it had any impact. And it turned out that it didn't. The only thing that impacted people's energy use was telling them how much they were using compared to the other houses in their neighborhood. And this is a technique called social proof. And it giving us context as to how, what the right way is to behave, like really motivates us. It's super powerful, especially when it comes to climate action. And so what Opower did was they operationalized this across the country and then eventually internationally, where we send energy reports out to people's homes, and using the information from utility companies, we're able to tell you where you're falling in terms of your energy use, and you get a smiley face if you use less than your neighbors. And it seems like this very simple technique, but in aggregate, it's had a huge effect. I think these energy reports have been being sent out for the past 15 years. And as you mentioned in your intro, it's so far saved people $3 billion off their energy bills, even though at an individual level, it's, a very small amount of savings. And yes, and you put in the chat, Nest does this too. So Opower really invented this whole new sector of behavioral energy efficiency. And they had to really convince a utility company just to try this out. But now it is the standard in the industry. And so it's just a really great example of how you could use these techniques from behavioral science, especially at scale, to have a big impact.
Amazing. And then I'm getting some good questions in the chat, so I'm going to save them. But some of them are related. So Valerie asks, how do you approach identifying opportunities in changing customer behavior? I guess for that example, like how would you realize that's an opportunity? Since climate solutions need a lot of convincing, how would you approach customer psychology in your work?
So I think it's about understanding the journey you're asking people to go through and really mapping out that entire journey, all of the different barriers people may have along the way, and understanding how you could help remove as many of those barriers as possible, amplify benefits wherever you can, and use the behavioral levers that you can. So, every action is different, but like really truly understanding all of the steps of an action is important. And there's difference between big one-time actions and investments like purchasing an EV. That's very different than just turning off your lights in your house every so often, or like eating less meat. These are more habitual behavioral lifestyle changes. So it's, you know, depending on what type of action, and there's like a ton of frameworks and models out there you could use. BJ Fogg from Stanford has a lot of great resources on this. Irrational Labs is a behavioral design agency, and they have a lot of great free resources and training as well. So hope that was a little bit helpful.
Yeah, and I'm going to plug one of your articles that you published on UX Collective too. One other related question: how does one get into the field of behavioral design, particularly if you're not a senior person with many years of experience already?
I mean, I had no experience when I got into it. I think there's usually two routes into it. It's either through academia, where you have a PhD in behavioral economics, or another related field, or it's through design. And that's how I came in, was through the design side, and just being more of an expert in human-centered design or UX design, and then learning the skill sets that are most relevant to what you do. I'll look up, one of my ex-colleagues at Irrational Labs wrote a really good article about how to get into behavioral design if you're interested. So I'm going to look that up while we're talking, and I'll put that into the chat.
Great, thank you so much. Eva, so you were previously working at Inspire Clean Energy, where you helped consumers switch to renewable energy supplies through their utility, which is a complex process that I'm sure is confusing for consumers. So I'm kind of curious to hear more about like how you approached that, how you worked to simplify all of these complex systems, what tools or processes did you use to achieve that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, at the beginning, it was a steep learning curve. It's similar to the one that you will go through anyways onboarding into a new company. But with the addition of, that you are unfamiliar with the energy industry or the industry itself, and then you don't know what are the regulation, legal things that you need to have in consideration. And basically people will tag that on you about things that you have never heard about in your life before. So that was quite a learning first, but my recommendation is no matter where you go, feel free to ask people and to be okay by being the person that don't know in the room, and ask many questions and have many conversations with people that will help you get those answers, because they are expecting you to do know. So basically it's not something that you are missing out. It's something that you need to just go through it. So once I got the gist of all of the mechanisms, how the industry work, how the energy got supplied to customers and things like that, I was able to map myself how things work, and then I use those that understanding, personal understanding, to execute based on that for the product that I was building. So as a designer, I use many of the skills that you learn in other industries to apply to that job, and then basically would be like being a strategic partner to help people or stakeholders form decisions, like with marketing, engineering, even the CEO, and to align into what are the things that we're going to be focusing next. You also need to lead, it would be good for you to lead from the design's perspective, workshops for discovery, for alignment, for other aspects. And being in a startup, or depending on the company that you're going to go through, you might need to use more chops that maybe you didn't do before. As an example, for me was research. When I was at Microsoft, we have an entire team of research. We have an entire team to look for data or to test the solutions or product that we are launching, before we launch it, and when they were through the life cycle. But then when I joined Inspire, we didn't have any research team. We have a research team that only one person, then they they have another hire, but they were focusing more on the business research, not on the product research. So their product research itself, it will be something that designers needed it to do and execute on and find and even share with the stakeholders. So it would be a little bit of everything that you might need to do. And tools that we use in our case was Figma, user interviews, and many others to try to find the solutions for the customers, but also to move the needle into the business and the scalability of it.
I think Eric's question fits nicely onto this. Beyond small digital experiences such as carbon calculators, or I would add like sustainable web projects, what do you see as the primary types of UX design projects that are needed in climate tech?
Yeah. So for us, we rapidly discovered that there is a huge gap on education and understanding. So basically, when you're designing your solutions, try to always think about like, what is a way that people will understand, even if they are not an expert, what you're trying to communicate. So as an example, for Inspire, we will be doing calculation and then we will be showing data and things to the customers, but then we couldn't assume that they will understand what we meant and how big of an impact that will be on the planet if they are using a lot of electricity, as an example. So we always try to layer in something tangible for people to see how big of an impact it is, or how small, or how useful. So always trying to bring closer that gap in between what you're trying to communicate and how people are going to be understanding that. Another thing that we see is ecosystem change and advocacy, but also things like data understanding, pattern identification, or even things like, I think that moving forward is going to be.
Yeah, so we don't tax it. So we don't go ahead.
I think that it was like by mistake unmuted. And then last thing that I was thinking when I read that question is like, I feel that IoT is going to be moving forward a lot, and hopefully a lot of new product or even product that were launched before can be reused and introduced into the climate tech to help with the impact that we want to have in the environment. So
Great.
that is what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Melissa. Oh, thank you, Siri. Melissa, I'm curious to also ask you this question because you're working on a great example of how UX and digital product design is used in climate tech projects. Is there any other examples that come to mind of what sort of software product design is needed?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about what I do day to day at Patch, which does include kind of the UX design side of things. So just a little bit more about Patch before I talk about my role. So Patch is a marketplace for selling and purchasing carbon credits. As a two-sided marketplace, there's kind of like two different buyers or two different types of users that we're designing for. So we have some folks thinking a lot about the demand side. And so those are the companies either purchasing carbon credits or they're building methods into their own products for their users to contribute to carbon credit projects. And that's a super fascinating side of the house to work on because there's just like so much complexity around carbon credit markets, and carbon credits are not all the same. And so how do we kind of educate these buyers about all the differences and help them make the decision around which they should be supporting in order to like support their business needs. But on the other side of the house, I'm kind of responsible for more of the supply side of the marketplace. And so what my day-to-day looks like is actually working with those carbon credit project developers. And so kind of what that looks like concretely is week to week, there's a few of them that I meet with regularly. And I kind of go into those conversations with, so the core question that we're asking them is, what can Patch be doing as a business in order to make your business as successful as possible? So how can we help you scale as much as possible? So very open-ended, a lot of the UX practice goes into that. To really understand like what we can be doing, whether it's helping them sell their credits, whether it's helping with financing, basically whatever we can be doing. It's also really cool because in addition to kind of those like weekly meetings, we've also got the opportunity to actually go and like visit these partners on the ground. And for me, that's also been quite eye-opening, just to kind of like see those facilities and see their day-to-day processes actually like moving mass on the earth, which is like quite different than I think what it can feel like working for a software company like Patch, where I'm in front of a screen all day, kind of just like slinging pixels. And so really having my eyes open to that side has been really cool.
Yeah, what's an example of like one of the facilities or the businesses that the supplier customers, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a huge range of technologies. Some of them that we've gotten to see are around things like direct air capture. So these like giant machines that are basically like vacuums that can suck carbon out of the air, and so like very much like these like huge mechanical facilities. I have my like bucket list of other facilities I'd like to see. So would love to go out and see one of our partners out in Maine, Running Tide, which I think some of you might have heard from earlier this week, but they're doing things like launching boats out into the middle of the ocean that grow kelp to sequester carbon very quickly and then dump that kelp to the bottom of the ocean. So there's a lot of differences and a lot of really cool partners out there doing different things.
Oh, that's so fun. Eric, you had a question?
Oh yeah, thank you so much for taking my question. I just wanted to make a quick pitch to everybody here, just because I don't get a lot of opportunities to be in a group of designers that are trying to change the situation of the planet, and I really feel like it's a little bit odd. I'm maybe in a similar boat to a lot of people kind of looking for work in the space right now. And what I've noticed is that since things are a little bit earlier stage, we're kind of more science oriented right now. I think it can be a little discouraging looking at job boards. That being said, I have the belief that design is kind of the future, is something that really needs to drive this space. And so what I am creating right now is a network for people that want to get involved in short-term projects, like just more part-time projects, to kind of collaborate with climate change companies that maybe need help but haven't quite made the commitment yet to full-time UX or full-time research, full-time design, things like this. So I did put a link earlier in the chat. I just wanted to make a shout out so people know who I am, why I'm doing this. It's kind of a humble thing, but there is a community you can join, which I'm creating right now. And I'll put the link here again. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like. But yeah, just anything we can do, I think, to come together as designers to make a difference. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Deena, back to you. One thing I'm kind of curious about is if or how we can make a shift from individual actions to creating more systemic change. And I know, like for myself, like my design background is mostly in consumer work, and so it feels like that's like the easiest or most natural way to approach things, and that's always a stepping stone to making real change. But I'm curious if you had any thoughts on what systemic change could look like.
Yeah, it's a really great question. Some people do think like, why are we focused on individual action? We really need the large scale policy changes in place. I just believe that it's a yes, and I think we need both. I think both are really important, and they both drive each other, because typically corporations and governments, they don't create policy or change their systems just to do good. There has to be another incentive for them, and so whether that's making a strong business case where it's going to actually be more profitable to do the more sustainable thing, or it's going to help their brand because individuals are now all demanding more sustainability. You have to find those aligned incentives. And that was actually the main reason Opower worked at all. Opower's clients were utility companies, or are utility companies that are regulated in the US. Many states have utility commissions where they regulate the utilities, and utilities have to meet certain energy efficiency goals. So the founders of Opower understood that the utility companies were already incentivized. They were being forced by policy to help their customers save energy. And so Opower is able to offer utilities a much more cost-effective way to do this, and a way more impactful way to do it than what they were trying before. So they were able to find where those incentives aligned and to create a business that then they could share that incentive of saving energy. Opower is more for climate, utilities more for, you know, regulation, but I think finding any of those overlapped incentives or helping to create them by drumming up consumer demand or educating people, the more people will start to shift their behavior, the more the whole markets start to change, and then industries will start to change their policies too, and politicians will realize that they could change policy and they won't get so much pushback. So I think it all works together, but you know, finding those overlapping incentives is really key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Danny also asked, how do we know if a company is truly making a positive impact? For example, are all carbon credit companies doing good? And I think what you're talking about with overlapping incentives is really important there, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that comes to mind in terms of measuring design impact, or I guess impact for good, as broad as that is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to carbon credit companies, and maybe Melissa can speak to that more. But I can say it is a challenge to measure the impact of what you do, and that is part of what should be part of your role as a designer or a product lead. How we measured at Opower is every time we sent out reports, it was everything was run as a RCT, a randomized control trial. So we would have a control group of tens of thousands of people, have another set of tens of thousands of people that receive these energy reports, and we could measure their energy use based on knowing if they received the reports or not. And so the more you could run statistically significant experiments, so you could prove like, hey, this actually does have an impact, you'll be able to, I think, have more success with your designs. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, because not all sustainability behaviors are easily measurable, and that's like where energy use, it's very easy to measure, but how much the mix of how much meat you eat or sustainability in your diet, really hard to measure. So it's you know, purchasing an EV, easier to measure. So you know, it depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you're designing for. But if you can find some true metrics or very strong proxies that you believe indicate that this behavior has been done, and then you could measure it and prove that your approach works, that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Eva, what keeps you motivated or inspired about making an impact through design?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I am a passionate person. I'm from Spain, I'm Hispanic, and we have all of it on our veins. But I feel inspired because I feel that I have the opportunity as a designer to guide people through that journey of having a positive impact in the environment. And additionally, not only doing that, through our product or through actions that they are having, or even by helping them achieve their goals that they are using or they are having, we are also helping the business to grow. And in order to do that, we will also be able to increase the reach of the impact that we are having, because if businesses are growing, they are helping more customers to succeed, and people are having even more impact on the environment. So for me, it's like truly inspiring being able to see the fruition of the effort that we put every day in our job, to be able to see how customers and how people go through that and actually do something for the planet. So for me, that has been always my inspiration, and that is why I decided to move from tech industry to climate industry as well.
Yeah, and I think as designers, we also have the skills to kind of visualize and prototype different futures to make it tangible and inspiring to people. So that's important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Melissa, are there any differences in approach or how you work with product development teams or the other creative teams that are specific to working in climate?
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit about my experience with this at Patch, which I imagine is probably a little generalizable, but at Patch, it's been really interesting that there's this juxtaposition of two worlds where we have a lot of people coming from kind of the standard tech world. So myself from Stripe, we have a lot of folks from like Shopify, Square, Plaid, et cetera. And then kind of the other half of the business is people coming from more of the traditional climate space. And seeing these two groups together has been like a very like fun and fascinating exchange. I can say like speaking like from my own perspective, the knowledge that these like climate folks bring to ourselves as a business has been just like so exciting and so rewarding. I know I personally look forward to like every meeting I get a chance to meet with them and learn from them. And I think on the other side, I think the way that more of the tech folks have exposed them to some of our ways of working in terms of like the product development process has been new for them. So working with some folks who had like never even really heard of product design as a function, same thing with product management. And so seeing that exchange and kind of like the learning of the ways of working together has been, yeah, just like a exciting thing to be doing. Yeah, I would say, I guess like one thing to add to that, a little bit different. I think that one thing that has been, I guess, just like slightly different from past experiences is being in a space where everyone has like exactly the same common goal and like values associated with that goal has been just like a little bit different. I think I've sometimes found myself in the past maybe working on like a engineering and product team where the product manager might have like slightly different goals from like the lead engineer who might have slightly different goals from myself. And so really being in the space where there is like such a common ground about what we're trying to accomplish has been really cool.
Awesome. And then I just want to go back to this question about design impact or company impact, and are all carbon credit companies doing good? I think maybe it's worth contextualizing what your company does. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a big question for us as designers is how do we understand and anticipate impacts and long-term impacts on our environments?
Yeah, such a spicy question. Yeah, it's definitely a big topic in the space. Yeah, and I will say, just like from my own experience, I do meet with a lot of these product developers. I have yet to meet one with bad intentions. I think we're out here trying to do the right thing. I think one thing that is important is thinking about specifically what you're measuring, because at the end of the day, that's kind of drives all of the initiatives and all of the goals. And so one way that's relevant at Patch is we recently went through a rebrand and redid our mission. Previously, our mission was kind of purely about carbon removal and reaching gigaton scale. Now we have a little bit broader mission that we're looking to rebalance the planet. And there's a lot of different ways in which our planet does need to be rebalanced. It's not purely about carbon removal or carbon sequestration. And so there are a lot of different product developers out there that are doing carbon removal, but they're also doing a lot of other important things like biodiversity, a bunch of other like very lofty goals. And so one thing that we're thinking pretty critically about at Patch is how do we design for achieving those goals as well, and how do we allow people to weigh the decisions of what is more important and where they should be kind of like focusing their efforts on helping support.
Yeah. Deena, I would love to hear from you on how people can find climate opportunities within their existing jobs or communities, if that's something that's possible.
Yeah, I think you can, and you know, other organizations talk about this as well. Just any job you can make into a climate job. So you can think about, one, does your does your company have any company-wide sustainability groups or efforts? And if not, you could start one. Then there's, if you're working in software, you could think about the impact of the software and code on the environment. And there's a lot of great resources out there on that. And if you are designing for consumers, thinking about if there are any different choices people can make throughout your product that are a bit more sustainable, even if that's not the overall goal of your product. So as an example of that, DoorDash and Uber Eats, I believe both of them rolled out features that let you opt out of receiving the extra like plastic silverware. And I think Uber has recently rolled out where you could choose to be picked up in an EV. And so these are small things, and, you know, by using your tools from behavioral science and perhaps like defaulting people to not receiving the utensils probably leads to a lot more people not receiving them. And so thinking about that, those things as well from all the behaviors you're asking your customers to make. Yeah, and then just things, small things in the office on your team, trying to encourage less business travel, less flying, just figuring out which restaurants to patronize when you're ordering food. So I think there's so many different ways to try and fold sustainability and climate into what you're already working on. And probably if there isn't a like-minded group that exists and you start one, I'm sure a lot of other people where you are would also be really excited and would be, you could probably create a nice little gathering of people. The most impactful way, though, I think, to make your job a climate job is to elevate climate in your company goals. So if you have OKRs or company goals, if you could find a way to align those incentives and make a business case to your company of why it is actually also profitable and important to achieve sustainability in some way and get that onto a top level goal, that's going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, that's great. And Eva, what is the role of community in the climate fight, and how can designers get smart on these issues as soon as possible?
So the role of the community, as I was mentioning before, is like it will give you a unique opportunity to connect with people and learn from each other. If you're not sure where you want to go, what is your next step of your career, what are even the options that you have. So sometimes it's just like overwhelming, the amount of information that you don't know. So the community will help you to network, to talk to people, to feel a little bit more confident about what you want to do next, and just get familiar with that. And then no matter what you decide to do, that is always good to be there, because it's just like a lot of people that can help you connect with someone that it will help you bridge that gap and then go there faster. So that is always an opportunity and something unique about having a community for you to use as you please, right? And also we also offer a lot of resources for you to use, like office expert hours. We have events in person and also online. And you know, for specifically for designers, like things that they can offer to organization, like designing thinking skills, helping stakeholders to be aligned, to collaborate. Like even some organizations are not used to collaborate early on the process. So basically being an advocate for that, it will help tremendously in the industry, no matter where you go, right? So I think that thinking how valuable your skills are is something that you need to be confident about, because as many of you said before, I think that it was Deena, our skills can be applied everywhere and are really important for unlock potentials and opportunities that the business maybe didn't thought about, but then through our expertise and capabilities, we will be able to help move the needle. So I think that the community can help you with that as well.
Awesome. Melissa, what is a piece of advice you would give to someone curious about making a leap into climate?
Yeah. So I think probably my biggest takeaway here is that people should be making the leap like much earlier than you think you should. And so like my own personal experience, I talked a bit about reading The Unhabitable Earth back in early 2020. It actually took me 2 years before I did make that jump over to working at Patch and working in climate. And I spent those 2 years kind of in my own time, listening to podcasts, reading more books, going through like a few existential crises around like how can I be most helpful with this problem, and ended up kind of like in this dream role now. But I do think there is like this alternate universe where I wasn't quite so picky about where I went, and I could have advanced a lot further in those 2 years in terms of my understanding of the space. I'll say that the year I've been at Patch, I've learned easily like 1,000 times more about climate than in those 2 years kind of on my own time. And just like the pace at which this industry is changing now, and the timelines we have around solving this problem, like I think people should be thinking about this not in terms of what is the perfect role for me that I can spend decades doing, but like what is the easiest way for me to make this transition, and just start learning, and it's quite easy to pivot from there.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to transition into some of the questions that have come through the chat. And I'm actually just going to start with this one from Valeria. I hope I said your name right. But with work that seems endlessly unsolved or unfinished, and especially with climate and how heavy that can be, what do you do to avoid burnout? And I'll let any of you answer.
I can take a stab at it. I will say, I mean, I was just on the top of an existential crises. A lot has happened in the last few years, and I totally understand the heaviness that comes with being so in tune with the space. I will say that it's been very different after transitioning to actually working on the problem itself, and just in terms of like having an outlet for these things, and knowing that you are making a difference, however small. I think that's just like been pretty night and day for me in terms of my like emotional well-being.
Yeah. And then going to another question. So Maggie asked a question about physical product designs. I don't know if we have any hardware designers here, but that definitely is something that intersects with what we're doing. How do you create designs that will last and avoid planned obsolescence? I don't know if anyone in the audience has an answer for that. All right,
I mean,
and then
if no one,
go for it.
ahead. Hey, Lydia.
Go ahead.
Hey, everyone. I'm Alex. I used to be at a food-based startup here in Seattle. Obsolescence is a really hard one. I think there's been a lot of literature for a very long time about defeating planned obsolescence, but culturally, there's a lot of resistance. I would start with reading Cradle to Cradle by William McDonough, and I forget his co-founder of that book and consultancy, but it's a great title, and they actually came out with a follow-up book. Fun fact, Cradle to Cradle is completely upcyclable, and the follow-up book is completely compostable. So it's just like a really fun, like industrial design curveball in there to accompany the like written information in the book. Yeah, Bianca posted a Goodreads link. Thank you, Bianca. And I would just say, like, I think if you're starting a hardware company, thinking about like not just the materiality of what you're producing, but also the externalities of your supply chain. because the actual built material of your end product might be completely cradle to cradle. Like you could upcycle it completely or completely compost it, but like it took like a lot of sunk carbon investment to like ship it to you from Indonesia or wherever it's being manufactured. And like at the end of the day, like we still got screwed over as a planet. So just want to like frame that.
Yeah, something to add to that we did had in Inspire was reusing thermostat or reusing current technology into something that you can evolve to supply your business, right? So I think that reusing is something also super helpful on climate change. So as much as you can do that and use sustainable product, the better for the company and for the planet.
Yeah, and then in terms of like lesser known areas of climate tech, Alex, you asked like what sort of opportunities should we know about? Stephen asked if there's design opportunities in areas where meteorology and climate change intersect. So that makes me think of like geospatial satellite data analysis types of things. If anyone has any other ideas, please share them here in the chat. And then Mike, you asked about UX research competency. This is something I've noticed too, and I'm wondering if it's just the stage, but it seems like research is particularly important when you have all of these complex systems that are interacting with each other, and it's definitely like a very specific skill that most designers don't naturally have. So that's something that I would say like we should be raising and advocating for. All right. Yeah, any other recommendations? So if you have any like last books or podcasts or anything that you want to throw out before we sign off, that would be great. And just thank you so much everyone for coming, and thank you so much to our panelists for joining us. Bye. Put it in the chat.